Hello everyone, welcome back to another Flesh and Blood video. In this one, we're taking a look at Oscilio Constella Intelligence now after Aurora's Living Legend. Aurora players are going to have to make a choice, either move over to the other Lightning Hero in Oscilio, or move over to a different deck entirely. I think a lot of them are going to go over to Oscilio as the cards are pretty similar. It does play a fair amount different, but still your expensive pieces, your Gone Flashes, your Channel Lightning Valleys are going to stay relevant, and you still get to play a pretty aggressive bursty deck. So with that, let's get started with the update. Oscilio, as you may know, is a 36 health 4 intellect elemental wizard hero with Essence of Lightning, and has the simple ability of once per turn instant, discard an instant to draw a card. The point of the deck is to filter through your hand to have a good mix of instants and non-instants. Of course, Oscilio does tend to be in situations where you have a lot of non-instants in your hand, which sometimes is good, sometimes is bad, but it lets you cycle out those instants that you might need to not have in your hand on defense, or if you have too many, pretty good. I really like his ability. You're not going to use it every game. The main thing you will use every game is his weapon. Volzar the Lightning Rod is a two-handed lightning wizard weapon staff. If you control an aura permanent with sigil in its name, it costs one less to activate, and as a once per turn instant, you can amp X, where X is the number of lightning cards you've played this turn. It costs 1, but of course if you have a sigil, it will be 0. The whole point is to have a really big turn of playing a lot of lightning cards and end the turn on a really good surge spell like an Etchings or a Mind Warp, or even just like a big burn spell like the Comet Storm to burn out an opponent. That's sort of the Oscilio game plan, is to have a wide chain into a burn spell at the end. For the equipment, Crown of Providence is my helmet of choice. You don't need Balance of Justice as much anymore. There aren't too many decks that are drawing a lot of cards. And the other helmet that people play Flash of Lightning isn't really my favorite helmet. After playing it a whole bunch, it hasn't really impressed me the most. So I think Crown of Providence is definitely my preferred helmet if I needed just a baseline helmet. We are playing Tunic because sometimes the games can go a little late. We do have Blossom of Springs in our sideboard, but we'll talk about that when we go over to the inventory section. Aether Bindings of the Third Age is not a very good card, but at least it does something for Oscilio. Sometimes it lets you get a large amount of bonus damage, as well as it's very good with some of our sideboard pieces. So I still would play the Bindings of the Third Age. Just, you're not going to see the most impact from them. You might see some impact from them like once in every 3 games. And then finally, Lightning Greaves, which are for our main combo versus a lot of our matchups where we play Gone in a Flash and then a bunch of instants and then keep playing Gone in a Flash. But Lightning Greaves are just a really good card. Base AB1, so you're already pretty good versus any Runeblade matchup, if any of them exist anymore. I think it's just Vincent. And they have Battle Worn 1, which again is good for some extra health since you only have 36 starting. The ability is, of course, the main reason why you're playing it, so you get some pretty good value out of it. Moving on to the main board, let's talk about the instants first, because I think the instants are generally the core part of the deck. Starting down here with the sigils, 3 Sigil of Lightning, 3 Conductivity, and 3 Brilliance. These are the main sigils you want to be playing. At least 3 Lightning and 3 Brilliance. These are just the best sigils you can be playing. I prefer 3 Conductivity. If you were going to play less Conductivities, I think it's fine. I wouldn't play less than 2. I would play 2 minimum, but I just like 3 because this is one that can sit and play and keep your weapon free the whole game. Some matchups that might not be good, some matchups that is actually like insane, especially the aggro mirror. So Sigil Conductivity is really nice. Doesn't have a lot of situations where it pops anymore, but other than that, it's a blue lightning instant sigil permanent, which is really nice. The other 2 on destroy give you an embodiment or draw a card, and they destroy themselves at the start of the action phase. We also play Blink. Blink is good for smaller Gone in a Flash turns. If you don't have enough instants or cards in hand to full combo, you can use the Gone in a Flash plus Blink to get some extra action points and keep going. really nice there, as well as Blink lets you play some off hands if you do end up having them. 3-channel Lightning Valley, just because it's a core Oscilio card, or it's a core Lightning card at this point. Just one of the best cards in the entire game. Really good value with the weapon, because the weapon can easily just let you pitch one of the cards right away. Not as good as keeping it around as Aurora is. It's actually the one downside of having a bunch of sigils is you remove that, or a sigil of conductivity specifically, you remove the way you can actually activate the Volzar to keep the channel in play, but in most situations you don't really care. It's just an insane card. If you can keep it around for 2 turns, you're just going to get so much value out of it. And then for our red instance, we play 3 electrostatic discharge and 3 electromagnetic somersault, as they're just really good value. Discharge is really good with the Gonna flashes, really good with any of our other attacks, and somersault very good with things like flittering charge and blast to oblivion. We do technically have one other full instant in the deck, and that is Null Shock, but I'm going to talk about that when I talk about the burn spells, which let's talk about those right now. Of course, Oscilio wants to end your turn on a burn spell. Which ones are we playing? Etchings of Arcana is one that feels like it was just straight designed for Oscilio. It's a 0 for 3 at red. We're only playing the red version. And if we surge it, which means we do more than its base, so if we do 4 or more damage, we will get to return a aura with sigil in its name to our hand. So we can get either of these blue sigils or the Sigil of Brilliance back. Normally it will be the Sigil of Brilliance, unless you desperately need that embodiment of lightning token going into your next turn, which there are worlds where that happens. Etchings of Arcana is just a really, really good free burn spell for that reason, letting you recur some sigils. Mind Warp, a little similar, just the opposite way. This is a 0 for 2 base, so you need to do 3 or more, and on hit, you'll shuffle your opponent's hand into your deck, or if you do 3 or more, you'll shuffle your opponent's hand into your deck, or whoever you hit hand into your deck, and they draw that many cards -1. This is sort of the reverse of Etchings. Instead of you going +1, you are making your opponent go -1, which is really powerful versus some matchups. Some matchups, it won't matter all too much, but you're still cutting a card out of their hand, which is very, very powerful, especially versus aggro matchups, because they play less Arcane Barrier. So if you make them shuffle their hand in, it makes their hand worse. Really, really powerful. The last 2 main deck burn spells are Comet Storm Shock and Null Shock. 3 Comet Storm and Shock, just because it's the biggest burn spell. It blocks 3, even though it has the instant component. It can be discarded to Oscilio. The only bad part about it is it's 2 cost, which, I mean, that's fair considering Comet Storm is a 2 for 5, but it does suck to have to pay 2 for the shock. There are sometimes you do end up paying 2 for the shock, but that's on turns you have a ton of blues in your hand and a ton of extra resources. Normally you're just playing this card for the Comet Storm component, which is still like an insane component of the card. Just being a 2 for 3 that lets you fuse it to your Entwined Lightning, count as a lightning card for any of your lightning synergies if you need it. You can pitch it for CLV if you want to keep CLV around. Discard it to Oscilio. It counts as a lightning card for Volzar if you play the shock component. It just does a lot of stuff for you. Being you're playing it for that 2 for 5 portion. And then Null Shock, the Null component doesn't actually come up as much anymore, but it never really came up in the first place. The main reason why you're playing this card is because it's a 1-cost shock. There's so many times where I wish I had this card in my deck and just hated it when it wasn't main board, and now that it's main board, it feels so amazing. It really just is here for that 1-cost shock. Sometimes Null comes up. Null is a 1-cost instant that you can target an instant that is cost less than the amount of arcane damage you've dealt to opposing heroes this turn, and then you negate that card. So if you've dealt maybe like 5 arcane damage to your opponent, you can negate a pretty big instant. Of course, your opponent can Arcane Barrier to prevent some. Your opponent can mainly that Arcane Barrier to prevent some, and you do have to spend a lot of cards to get a lot of that arcane damage, but opponents will have to play around this card anyway, even though it's here because they play it after your burn spell. You get a lot of value. Again, though, mainly it's here because of the shock component. The shock can help you end a game. It makes your opponent have less life than they naturally do. It's an instant, so you can always just discard it to Oscilio if you don't need it, and it's a yellow and a lightning card, making it very, very powerful. Finally, let's talk about the attacks in the deck. I'm opting for 4 copies of Blast to Oblivion, 3 red and 1 blue. These are just because you can get a lot of incremental value thanks to the sigils and some of the other instants in the deck. Blast to Oblivion was a card that wasn't really always my favorite, but moving into this new meta, it seems a little slower, or at least less bursty. The assassin decks don't kill you as fast as Aurora did, and there's other slower decks in the format, so you have more time to use Blast to Oblivion to set up bigger combos or just grind a bit of extra value. Eclectic Magnetism is a 1-for-5 that lets you play your next spell as an instant. Really powerful attack. Again, not my favorite card, but whenever I've drawn it and played it, it has been amazing. I wouldn't play this deck anymore without 3 of it. 2 Entwined Lightning, just because it's a 0-for-4 go. Again, really simple. It's not a lightning card, which sucks because it won't tick up an amp for your Volzar, but it is just a 0-for-4 go again. That gets some good value. Flittering Charge, just because it's a really easy 0-for-4 go again to activate. A third of your deck or instance, you get really good value there. Only 2 copies of Fry, simply just because it doesn't block. I do like this card a lot, but it not being able to, or it is able to block, but it not blocking for any value does really hurt the card. 3 Gone in a Flash, because it's your main combo piece. That lets you get a lot of your damage in big turns through. 2 Lightning Surge, just because it is a little harder to set up, but if you can get it into your arsenal, you get some good value. And then finally, 3 Current Funnels, just because it's a blue block 3 that gives you some go again if you can actually get it off. That is the main board. It's a 54-card main board, which means you are adding in 6 cards from our inventory. For this Oscilio list, I'm opting for a little bit of a switchboard plan. As you can see here, we have Storm Striders. Storm Striders are the generic wizard shoe, all the way back from Arcane Rising Veil. You play a wizard spell at instant speed for 1 resource. These are here mainly for our really fast matchups. Even though 1 extra block from our Lightning Greaves is nice, and sometimes being able to combo with Gone in a Flash, just presenting Storm Striders makes our opponent's life total so low from the beginning, especially because we'll be bringing in glyph overlays when we bring in the Storm Striders, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Versus those really fast matchups, you make them really think if you can burn them over, making their starting life total about the same as yours, since you're always going to be able to threaten a good amount of damage on your opponent's turn. So that's the reason I really like Storm Striders. There are matchups, aggro matchups, where you don't bring this in because you either have time to go for your Storm Striders combo, or you want to bring in something like Snag in the Assassin matchups. And with Snag, you really like having your equipment because you can block perfect numbers and then Snag to lower their attack down. But in other aggro matchups, Storm Striders is a very, very powerful tool. For other equipment, Null Rune Hood, because if we're playing against Wizard, we can't block with Crown. So mainly Kano, Oscilio, and Verdance, we can just play our other helmet because we can actually block with it in those matchups. So Null Rune Hood really just for Kano, but you always got to respect Kano. I think he might come back a little bit. We play Shock Charmers for the same reason, just get some good prevention. This will come in versus any of our Wizard matchups, just because they do show pretty high numbers, and again, our bindings of the Third Age aren't really the best. And then Blossom of Springs for our just fastest matchups. Any matchup we bring in Storm Striders, I do like having Tunic because it actually lets us use it on our opponent's turn. But other than that, I will go for the Blossom of Springs just in those aggro matchups, just so we can have the on-demand activation of our Lightning Greaves if we need to do it really early. For the rest of our sideboard, 3 Glyph Overlay. These will come in whenever we bring in Storm Striders. It's just an extra burn spell, but it also gives us a lot of extra value. It has the upside of doing more damage based on the number of sigils we control, which yes is only 9, but even on a turn where we say play 2 sigils into the Glyph Overlay, that's coming in for 7 thanks to our weapon. Plus, we get to shuffle those sigils in if we do at least 4. So on turns where if we don't kill with Storm Striders, we put them very low, we can shuffle in Brilliances or Lightnings to get a bunch of extra value. It also lets you shuffle in your Conducts, which are just going to sit there all game. So if you can get the Conducts off earlier, the Glyph Overlay can come in for later, for more damage. I really do like this card with the Storm Striders. I used to play it in my inventory in the Cheerios version of Oscilio, and it actually was pretty good there. It just didn't like it for certain matchups. And I actually played it versus the slower matchups and not the aggro matchups. But now we're bringing it in for those aggro matchups because it has really good value with the Storm Striders. 2 Lightning Press for some matchups that our combo isn't very good against, mainly the matchups that I bring in the Storm Striders. I go down 1 or 2 Gone in a Flash for the Lightning Press because Lightning Press doesn't actually combo well with Gone in a Flash. And since we're going down our Lightning Greaves, we want to go up more things that just let us play a standard game, and Gone in a Flash is definitely weaker without Lightning Greaves. You do have to be careful that this does not block. For defensive options, we play 2 Shelter from the Storm, 3 Sink Below, 3 Sigil of Solace. I personally don't own 2 Shelters, so I play a 3rd Lightning Press instead. I think this ratio is way better, though, because we do have our 3rd copy of Null Shock in the sideboard. This is for our slower matchups because we don't get punished as much for playing another Shock in our deck, as well as we want the Lightning Greaves combo in our deck, which means that we're not bringing in Storm Striders, so we can't bring in the Glyph overlays for our extra burn over. So I really like that Null Shock, and then depending on the matchup, you go Press or Shelter, and then you pick another defensive option of your choice. The other 2, Sigil of Solace. This is for matchups that get a lot of free damage through. Sink Below is good for matchups that you can really easily block. Anything that has a lot of Dominate, I do like the Sigil of Solace because it's really hard to block those decks anyway. You might not be able to put a Sink and another card in front because you might not have this in your arsenal. Any matchup that has a lot of breakpoints, a lot of 4s, or just a lot of normal attacks that I can easily block, we go for the Sink Below just because it helps us block those decks out a little easier. Already talked about the Null Shock, and then 3 Snag because Assassin is a very, very bad matchup for you. You get destroyed by Assassin. They have so much disruption. Oscilio is one of the decks that gets disrupted so easily. Snag alongside your blocking equipment, your Lightning Greaves, your Aether Bindings, and your Crown of Providence give you so much value. One of the best cards you can actually play in Oscilio because if you don't need it, you can always discard it, go for something else. Really, really powerful. One of my favorite cards in the entire deck, favorite tech cards out there. But with all of that, that is going to be the end of the video. Oscilio is looking a lot better simply just because of a format change. The decks that he wasn't very good against are now gone. Even the Zen and Enigma matchups were a little hurting for Oscilio, especially Enigma, as he didn't really have the power to punch through all those illusions. But now that those decks are gone, as well as Aurora, Oscilio can hopefully come back. Maybe in High Seas he gets an expansion slot card. I have no idea why they gave Aurora the Armory deck and then made none of the cards usable in Oscilio. Like, we got Skizik and the bad equipment. And Skizik isn't good in this deck because we don't have the other card to actually use it with. So Oscilio is playing with a bunch of cards that came out in Rosetta, and like the only new card in the deck is Shelter from the Storm. And that's a card that every deck plays. But with the format change, Oscilio has gotten a lot better. And I can't wait to see him have a little more success in the upcoming format. But with all of that, that is going to be the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.